What is up, my YouTube family? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, of course, it's just welcome to my channel, and now welcome back. You can go ahead and hit the subscribe button because you will not be disappointed. Unless, of course, you know, some people don't have good taste. So if that's your situation, you might be. Okay, I hope you guys are well. Happy to see you again this week. I really don't have anything to talk about today because I just seen y'all. So without any delay, I will get right into the case we're talking about today, which is the case of Dana Satterfield. She was born Dana Fowler in Spartanburg, South Carolina, November 16th of 1967. And she has a pretty typical upbringing. She blossomed into a very bright young woman with a very friendly disposition who has no trouble making friends. Dana has a light that many people are drawn to. In high school, she meets who she believes is the love of her life, her soulmate, and the two of them get married right after high school. Shortly after, she gives birth to the couple's first child, a daughter that they name Ashley. And unfortunately, after becoming parents, things very quickly fall apart between the two of them. Their union unfortunately ends in divorce, but at around 20, Dana gets her second chance at love when she meets Paul Michael Satterfield, aka Mike. Mike is completely enamored with Dana. He is also very good with her daughter and can very well see himself taking care of them, you know, joining their little family. Mike owns and operates an air conditioning business, which is doing very well, so he definitely has the means to take care of them, at least financially. And when he proposes to Dana, she accepts, excited to give this whole marriage and wife life another shot. The two of them get married, and just like with the first marriage, welcome a child shortly after, this time a boy that they named Brandon, and Mike could not be more proud, and neither could Dana. She has her husband, she has her daughter, and now a son, and Dana really enjoys being a mom and a wife. She's just one of those women that really enjoy nurturing things, who takes great pride in the things that she pours into. And while she enjoys being a wife, a mother, a homemaker, and all of these things, she also really enjoys styling hair and has a dream of owning her own salon someday. Styling and cutting hair, styling hair, whether she's given a haircut, coloring, layering, curling, anything, just really brings her a lot of joy. And after the children reach an age where she is comfortable leaving them in the care of someone else, she decides to pursue this lifelong dream of hers, and Mike really supports it. Together they brainstorm ideas of how the shop would be, how it'll look, ways that she could provide her clients with a nice elevated experience. He is just very supportive and very involved in the process. He even helps her find a space to rent out. They get the place set up, and she is finally living out her dream of owning a shop. Now, unfortunately, it does seemingly come with a price. A lot of pressure is placed on their marriage once they both become business owners, and after a while it becomes too much. In 1995, after 7 years of being married, the two of them decide to separate. Now, Mike hopes that the two of them can work on their issues. Maybe a little bit of time apart would help them realize that this is what they want and that they're better together. But unfortunately, Dana ends up meeting with a divorce attorney to see about making their split permanent. She was very sure that this is no longer a relationship that she wanted to be in. And as far as her business is going very well, she has worked extremely hard to build up her clientele. She services everybody from children to cotton tops, okay? You got a little bit of hair, she can do something with it. Not only is she good at what she does, people like her. They enjoy being in her presence. She has also built a nice rapport with her suppliers, one of whom being Diane Harris, who sells cleaning products. And Diane typically goes and makes her rounds not only to Diane's shop, but the businesses surrounding, selling her products and making it convenient for the people. They don't have to go anywhere. They don't have to order. They just wait on her to stop by. July 31st of 1995, Diane stops by Dana's salon at 6:30 p.m. Dana makes her purchases. The two of them chat and catch up a bit, and then Diane leaves to make her other rounds in the area. Almost 2 hours later, at 8:11 p.m., Diane passes by Dana's shop again. The lights are still on, and she can see Dana is in there sweeping up likely preparing to close down the shop for the evening. Now at 8:31 p.m., just roughly 20 minutes later, Diane walks past the salon again to the spot where she usually stands and waits for her ride to pick her up. The lights of Dana's shop is still on, but this time she doesn't see Dana. Now as she is waiting for her ride, she is still in earshot and eye view of Dana's salon, and she hears two loud thumping sounds come from the direction of it. She doesn't see anything, but she notices that the lights are now off in the shop, which still does not strike her as odd. So she figures maybe Dana dropped something or had bumped into something moving around in there in the dark as she is preparing to leave. So in Diane's mind, she's expecting to see Dana come out of the shop any moment now, and she's like mentally preparing to say their final goodbyes for the night. But she hears yet another loud thump, and when she looks this time, she sees a man jumping out of the window. She and this man, they lock eyes, okay? Stare at each other for a moment, and each of them run in the opposite direction of each other. Diane runs to the nearest phone that she can find to report that Dana's shop had been robbed. Now, when the respondent officer gets there, the first thing he notices is that while the window screen to the shop is pushed out, and of course the person that called said that somebody jumped out of it, the door was slightly open, the front door. So why would somebody opt to go out of the window instead of the door? That's odd. Believing that he is responding to a burglary, he walks the salon looking for obvious signs of theft. He goes toward the register to see if it had been open, just looking for any obvious signs. But instead, he finds 27-year-old Dana Satterfield laying lifeless next to the water heater. She is unclothed from the waist down. She had been essayed and then strangled with a duffel bag strap that was hanging from the water heater, and she had also been beaten. At this point, robbery is completely ruled out because nothing tangible has been taken. They take a look at her appointment book to see if she had booked any late appointments for that evening, and there are none. Next, they scour the scene for evidence, and whomever had done this had not been careful at all. There are fingerprints on the water heater. There is male DNA left inside of her. As detectives typically do, especially when they know things were a bit rocky, they suspect her future ex-husband Mike as the person that had done this. And when they match his fingerprint to the one found on the water heater, they are convinced that this was his work. But then they look at Mike and they think about what Dana said. The man had jumped out of the window. They didn't think Mike Gave physically fit enough to jump out of a window. Now, I'm not saying this because I feel like he could have hopped out the window, okay? But officers did not believe that Mike had physically hopped out of this window like that, in that shade, for real. When they speak to Diane to get a physical description of the guy so that they could have a sketch made, she says that the person was about 5'9". He looked like a young white male, light brown hair, and was slim. And this certainly does not match Mike's description. So at this point, they ease up off of Mr. Mike. He could have very well orchestrated it, but he was not the one that physically did this to her. And at this point, that is who they're looking for. And Mike also had a very plausible explanation as to why his fingerprint was found on the water heater. His company is an air conditioning and heating business. This was in his realm of work. So it made sense for him when she opened the shop to do the work himself as opposed to them hiring somebody else to do it. Within an instant, on what felt like a very average day for him, Dana's life was tragically cut short, and he was then tasked with raising their children alone. And to add insult to injury, they were looking at him as the person responsible. Now, investigators do find a second fingerprint, a bloody one, and this fingerprint does not match Dana's, nor does it match Mike's. This time, they're pretty sure that they do have the actual fingerprint of their assailant. They just need to find out who he is. They enter it into the database to see if it matches any other criminal that had already been picked up, and nothing comes back. Next, they appeal to the public, asking for any information that leads to an arrest, and within days, the calls begin to roll in with tips. There's a man who calls in and tells police that he had been driving past Dana's shop that evening at around 8:40 p.m. He noticed that the lights were off, but Dana's car was still outside, which struck him as odd. And he also says that as he kept driving, he spotted a man not far from the shop standing outside of a white and blue Bronco. A murderer love a Bronco, don't they? Now him and this guy, they make eye contact, and his spidey senses had told him that something was up with this guy. He felt like the guy was suspicious. At the time, he had not connected the two, but now he believes that this guy might have been the person that had done this. More tips and calls come in that unfortunately do not lead to any arrests, and 10 years go by without Dana's family receiving any type of answers or justice for what had happened to her. During that time, another tip had come in from someone who was incarcerated, and he said that he believed his cellmate is the person responsible for Dana's murder. According to the guy, his cellmate Russell Quinn carried around this photo of Dana everywhere he went, every day. I mean, he in jail, so it ain't like he going too many places, but you know, down to the yard, to the cafeteria. And he would also always talk about her and allude to the fact that he was responsible for what happened. Police create a collage of mug shots and they present them to their eyewitness, Diane, who picks his out of all of them, believing that he was the guy that she had seen jump out of the window that night. But their hopes of finally cracking the case are completely shattered when his DNA does not match the DNA that they had recovered from the scene. Turns out the guy was just a weirdo. Over the years, while they have worked tirelessly trying to solve this case, Mike has taken on the role of a single father. He has raised their children, always letting them know how wonderful of a woman their mother was. And in 2005, Dana and Mike's now 18-year-old daughter Ashley is making her second trip to a local auto repair shop. Now, the mechanic Mike, he recognizes her because she just recently brought her car in for something else. The two of them chat for a bit, and as soon as Ashley leaves, you know how people like to gossip. One of his co-workers tells him, like, you know, that's the daughter of that salon owner that was found inside of her shop 10 years ago. All of the locals, of course, knew about what had happened and had always sympathized with her children. But Mike's feelings go a bit beyond sympathy because he knows, or at least he believes he knows, who was responsible for Dana's murder. When it happened, Mike was in high school, and that day his friend Jonathan Vick had picked him up in a blue and white Ford Bronco, and in conversation had mentioned that he was going to Dana's shop to get a haircut, but he would be going later on that evening, which really struck Mike is odd because who gets a haircut at night? But this is not the worst of what he hears. Jonathan goes on about how attractive Dana is, how much of a crush he has on her, and his plans to make his move tonight and ask her out. Jonathan is 17 years old and living in the land of delusion. He has not a snowflake's chance in hell. So his friend Michael laughs in his face. But this really irritates Jonathan, so much so that he puts Michael out of the car. Now, Michael hadn't thought anything else about it until he had seen on the news what had happened to Dana later that night, and he wondered if Jonathan had done it. He, of course, didn't think that Jonathan had a chance at all and would be rejected, but had Jonathan met Dana's rejection with rage? As soon as he saw the report on the news, he actually was one of the people that had called in with a tip. And he had told police all of this. He had also mentioned the type of car that he drove, which was that blue and white Bronco. Twice they have heard about this Bronco. Now, police went out to Jonathan's home where he obviously lived with his mother and had asked her about her son's whereabouts and where their Bronco was on the evening of July 31st. She assures them that her son had nothing to do with it. And after they made a couple more stops to the home, asking questions, wanting to talk to Jonathan, she had actually made this sign and put it on the back of the truck that said, "This is not the Bronco, don't waste your time." Now, at this point, because mama is obviously not gonna be cooperative, they decided to take the legal route and have the courts order that Jonathan submit a sample of DNA. But the request is denied because according to the courts, driving past a crime scene is not sufficient grounds for requesting a DNA sample. And with that, there was nothing else that they could really do with Jonathan being a minor unless he confesses to the crime, and he was not talking, at least not to them. And when police had failed to find an angle to get Jonathan, Michael had simply gone on with his life, because what else is there really for him to do? He's already told them what he knows. The rest was left up to them. But here he was 10 years later talking with the daughter that Dana had left behind, and again his conscience calls him to action. He calls police again, urging them to look into Jonathan Vick as the person responsible for this crime. However, he does not want to give his own identity. He calls in anonymously. He did not want to be mentioned in any of the things because obviously his friend Jonathan, who was still very much around, is a killer and very capable of taking him out. Unfortunately though, they tell him that they cannot obtain a court order without Michael's name and his true identity, which I don't know if that's true or not. That didn't make sense to me. Michael doesn't want the same thing to happen again. He does not want Jonathan to continue to get away with this. So he decides to go ahead, identify himself, and with that, they're able to get the court order and thus the DNA sample from Jonathan Vick. He doesn't give any type of fight. He just, oh, y'all need the DNA? Here it is. And this sample matches the DNA that they have found on her that night. His fingerprint also matches the bloody one left behind. Why it didn't come up before, I have no idea, because Jonathan had been arrested over those 10 years several times for domestic violence. His mother shooing away the police officers all those years ago had really worked out in his favor. After high school, he had gone on to join the military, where he served a couple of years before returning home, struggling to hold down a job. He had begun dating a woman by the name of Heather Sellers, and the two of them had gotten engaged, even though the relationship was very toxic. Only 5 months into them dating, Jonathan had shown her his real true colors, which were extremely rude, nasty, possessive, and controlling. He also had that Ike Turner spirit on him. He liked to put his hands on her. In 2002, Heather was working at the Waffle House, and September 24th, she had arrived to work with a backpack, and she tells her coworkers that the backpack has a change of clothes because she has a date with Jonathan after work. Now, 2 weeks prior, she had called off their engagement because he just wasn't showing her that he was the man that she needed him to be. But the two of them had continued to talk, and Jonathan wanted to take her out on a nice date as like this act of good faith. The following day, Jonathan had shown up to the convenience store where Heather's grandmother worked, asking if she had seen or heard from Heather, because he is not since the night before. She tells him no. Jonathan tells her not to worry, that he'll find her. But the grandmother doesn't hear from him again. And Heather has not been seen nor heard from by anyone since the night of their date. Not long after she was reported missing, her car was found at the bottom of a local river. Now, her family had insisted to police that they believed Jonathan was responsible, that he was very abusive and their relationship was very troubled, but they're unable to find any proof incriminating Jonathan, even though he had admitted to being with her the night that she had disappeared. Without a body or any type of evidence, they don't have enough of anything to charge him with the crime. So again, Jonathan is able to go on with his life. He gets married. He has a daughter of his own. But y'all, one of his ghosts from his past is coming back. When he received the court order for the DNA, he had no choice but to comply. But he also proclaims his innocence, denying any of the things, even when his DNA comes back as a match to the DNA recovered at the scene, the bloody fingerprint and the DNA left on her. Finally, after 10 years, he is charged for the murder of Dana Satterfield, and his trial begins in November of 2006. This trial is very short and it only lasts 4 days. The prosecution leans heavily on the irrefutable DNA evidence that they have, while his defense argues that their client was innocent. Their Hail Mary is the fact that a strand of pubic hair was found on Dana that did not match their client, and they insisted that this fact alone was enough to at least introduce reasonable doubt. But the prosecutors countered that by pointing out the fact that he had essayed her on the floor of the men's bathroom, so the hair could have belonged to anyone who had visited the shop that day. The jurors deliberate for a little bit under 20 minutes before returning a verdict. guilty. Now, because he was only 17 at the time of the crime, he is able to avoid the death penalty, but he is given a life sentence plus an additional 30 years. He still claims that he is innocent, that the guilty party is still at large, and that her family has not received justice. He also has denied having any involvement in Heather's disappearance, which remains open and unsolved. Jonathan immediately requests a new trial, claiming that his lawyer was incompetent, but at his hearing, his request was denied. And y'all, he ain't learned nothing from being angry and violent, because he attacked one of the corrections officers and got an additional 3 years added to his sentence. He can first start applying for parole in 2035, but I doubt he gonna get it then. Look at him crying in jail. You weren't crying when you was in that lady's shop. You wasn't crying when you took Heather on that last and final date. Now you want to cry. That's crazy. They got him locked up down to the Spartanburg Community Jail. If you want to send some hate mail, that's where you send it. Oh no, he might just be happy to get a letter, child. Don't send him nothing. That pretty much completes today's story. Let me know your thoughts down below. Like the video before you leave. Share the video with a friend. Subscribe to the channel if you have not. As always, I appreciate you so much for spending your time with me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Peace. Not Bella hair being in my lash for the outro. All right, let me go wash my face because I absolutely hate this eye makeup. What is up, my YouTube? Oh wait, I might be blurry. Let's do that. Now, she was born Dana. She was not born Dana Satterfield, girl. Now, Mike is doing well from almost 2 hours later at 8:11 p.m. Not me mixing any names. Now, at 8:30 p.m., Dana walks, not Dana. At this point, robbery is completely moved, girl, what? This Apple Watch tapping on this desk, baby, is working my nerve. They ease up a bit. There is, wait a minute, girl. The cheek looking a little too rosy. Let's fix that. Let's just mute that a little bit. Okay, it's better. Donde es mi mascara negra? He calls the police again, asking them to look at David. Not David, who is that? Just 5 months, what?